We have 4 present, 3 absent.
We do have a quorum. We may go into executive session first. I know a couple of committee members have other committees to go to as well. So I now move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? We do have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. And the ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We now are in executive session. We're going to first bring up Senate Bill 513 that we heard before this committee. Do I have a second? I do have a second. The bill's for the committee. Senate Bill 513 allows for a sales tax exemption of boat dock rentals. It also allows for the beginning farmer income tax deduction. I have a committee substitute, and I move that we adopt Senate committee substitute for 513. Do I have a second? I do have a second. This substitute changes the language in the boat dock section, addressing some of Senator Beck's concerns to read all boat dock rentals or leases thereof. This change was made to clarify the intentions of the bill. Discussion on the adoption of the substitute. Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the Senate committee substitute say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We have adopted the Senate committee substitute. I now move that we do pass Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 513. Do I have a second? We do have a second. Any further discussion on the do pass motion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Hoskins?
Aye.
Esslinger? Beck? Eigel? Fitzwater? Huff? Roberts? 4-0.
By your vote of 4-0, you have voted to do pass Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 513. That's the only bill that we're going to exec out as of right now. I move that we go back out of executive session. Do I have a second? Do you have a second? All those signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. We are out of executive session.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Beck.
Are we your favorite committee members? I just want to know.
You are definitely my favorite. You're my favorite committee member named Doug Beck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. First up, we have Representative Riley with House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. This establishes the Regulatory Sandbox Act. This is very similar to the one that have already passed out of this committee. Proceed when ready, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alex Riley. I'm the state rep from the 134th District, which covers Southwest Springfield, the city Battlefield, and Greene County. Thanks for allowing me to present House Bill 268 for you this afternoon. I know you have all heard this bill a couple of times already and have already passed the Senate version out of the Senate earlier this year. I think it may have been the first bill out of the Senate or one of the early ones. So I'm not going to waste a lot of your time because I know you know this issue well, but the bill establishes the Regulatory Sandbox Act in the state of Missouri. What we are doing with this bill is creating a way for individuals who are entrepreneurs, innovators, they want to bring new products or services to market, a way for them to do that outside of the normal regulatory structure that's in place. We still have a number of protections within the bill to make sure there is government oversight. But what we are trying to do is encourage entrepreneurship in the state, let the nation know that Missouri is open for business. We're doing cool and exciting things in the innovation space here in Missouri, and this is one tool in the toolbox that we have to do that. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and close because I know you all know this issue well.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none. First up to you're welcome. First up to testify in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Nancy Giddens, representing United We and the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. We supported the Senate version and would like to go on record in support of this version as well.
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, testify in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chuck Pierce, representing Associated Industries of Missouri, go on record in support.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, testify in favor. It's a race. Proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noel Torpy for Next Missouri. Just want to thank you and the House sponsor for pushing this legislation.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, testify in favor.
Mr. Chairman, Brad Jones with the NFIB. We supported your Senate bill, and we certainly support this House bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, testify in favor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Philip Arnzen with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we'd like to go on record in support.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thanks.
Next up, testify in favor. Seeing none, anyone here to testify in opposition of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268? Please state your name, who you're with for the committee, and proceed when ready.
Hello, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to testify before this committee. My name is Michael Berg, and I am representing the Sierra Club Missouri chapter, and we oppose House Bill 268, the Regulatory Sandbox Act. We are worried that when you let people evade regulations, then it could cause harm to people, that it could also be a potentially unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority based on the separation of powers. And we're worried especially about evasion of environmental regulations. And we think, the goal of promoting entrepreneurship would be better served by setting up a regulatory relief office that helps businesses, especially small businesses, navigate the existing rules on the book instead of a regulatory sandbox. We recognize that this is passed and that there is desire to have a regulatory sandbox. We don't like the concept, but and we also, I want to recognize that the bill sponsor has worked with us, and there were some good changes made as far as giving more time to departments to look at issues to see if people would be damaged, and also steps taken in transparency. Unfortunately, we see a problem in a couple things. One, this could promote industries that would be environmentally damaging, and also, if applied to environmental law, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Resource and Conservation Recovery Act, that it could lead to evasion of needed regulations, and if it went on long enough, the potential loss of delegated authority for the DNR from the EPA. So we have proposed three amendments, one of which my colleague would be able to answer more questions and can speak on more later, to make sure and they're in the testimony, that delegated authority is not threatened, to just show that it can't be done. Regulation cannot be waived if it puts the state below federal minimum standards for environmental regulation. And there's also potential amendments. Just every time it says that we're looking out for the health and safety and financial well-being of consumers and the public, when the agencies are looking at that, just add the word the environment, so that the agencies can see, does this threaten the environment, our natural resources, and water, air, wildlife. And the other issue we have that could be cleaned up, and if it was changed, still does not change the basic idea of what the bill is trying to accomplish, is to clean up language to make sure that there's a clear definition of what an innovative practice is, to say that it's clearly distinguishable for existing technologies or practices, because as it's written, you could just have a company say just their normal practice and just say, oh, it's innovative, and then everybody would be eligible for this. So we've got amendments that would not get rid of the spirit of the bill, but could still take care of these concerns.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up to testify in opposition. Proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Charles Miller. I'm the policy manager at Missouri Confluence Waterkeeper. We're a nonprofit based in St. Louis dedicated to clean water, both drinking water and environmental. So, yeah, as Michael alluded to, I think we've got just really, I want to drill in on one issue here, and that's kind of this delegated authority and these existing federal environmental laws. The specific place where our concerns are raised in this bill is on page 11, lines 13 through 15. Basically, it says that a Sandbox participant has a license or a permit under the laws of the state for the purposes of any provision of any federal law requiring licensure or other authorization by the state. I don't pretend to be an expert on anything outside of environmental law, so there may be good reasons for that outside of the environmental context. But those three bills that the Sierra Club mentioned, the Clean Water, Clean Air, and the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, that's solid waste regulation in plain English, they all have something called, they operate under a cooperative federalism framework. So basically, EPA sets statutory minimums, then they delegate authority to DNR to permit things in accordance with those minimums. And our concern is that the language here might create the false impression for Sandbox participants that they're no longer required to get permits under these acts from DNR. That would be a disaster for the participants in the Sandbox because it would open them up to enormous, not only liability for enforcement from either DNR or EPA, but also civil liability because each of those federal laws has a citizen suit provision, meaning if I go out or you go out and notice that somebody's not got a permit they're supposed to, or they're evading a permit, you can go ahead and sue them in federal court. I don't think that was obviously the intent here, but I am concerned about that language, and I think we would really just like to see that cleared up in a way that makes it clear to Sandbox participants that under these cooperative federalism statutes, they are still going to have to get clean water and clean air and solid waste permits if that's something they would have had to do in the first place. I think a good example of kind of what we would like to see is just making it so that, for example, I think a lot of the intent of this bill is for, financial technology. And so if they get a waiver from the state banking regulator, we'd like to see that, the permits that are waived are only those that would be necessary from that agency. And that way it also allows agencies to kind of understand the entire scope of what they may be doing when they waive a single regulation, and not expanding it to authority that other state agencies have.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to testify in opposition? House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. Seeing none, anyone here to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none. Representative, you have any final concluding remarks? All right. That concludes the hearing on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. Next up, we have House Committee Substitute number 2 for House Bill 713 and also Senate Bill 493. I think what we may do is have you all present together, or Representative Reedy, if you want to present your bill first, and then before we take questions, then Senator Crawford, if you want to, you can sit up here with them as well, and then you can present yours. I understand they're very, very similar in nature. And so then as far as witnesses, we'll take witnesses for both bills together, but just make sure you write on your witness form if you're for or against it, and put both of the bill numbers if you're for both or against both. Representative Reedy, proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee, for hearing my bill today. For the record, I'm Roger Reedy from District 57, which is part of Benton, Pettis, Johnson counties in central Missouri, home of Whiteman Air Force Base. Today, I will present House Bill 713. It addresses a problem that exists today. I call it a taxpayer protection bill. According to state law, the assessors, when they go to assess vehicles, they use the October issue of the NADA book and use average trade-in value. In 2021 and 22, due to higher used car prices, these assessments went up. when on personal property, when there's an increase in assessment, there is an increase in taxes because there's no rollback provision. So what this bill does, it removes NADA from the statute, and it says that assessors and the tax commission would work together to choose a value guide, and they would gain the MSRP value. And then what they would do with that, they would, after immediately taking off 15%, they would put in place a depreciation schedule so that each year that car is assessed, it would continue to go down in value and to depreciate. A lot of vehicles went up in those years, and our taxpayers paid it when they went to pay their taxes. And this bill came through the House. It passed through committee with no opposition, passed through rules, and it passed out of the House 150-0. And this bill, what it would do, it would ensure that we have continuity from county to county where district lines cross, and provide a fair valuing mechanism for used cars for our taxpayers. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and hear Senator Crawford's first, and then we'll have both of you up there to take questions. Senator Crawford, proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, Sandy Crawford, District 28. I am going to be using a Senate committee sub, which you all should have received, hopefully.
That's the one in .02C, I believe?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, .02C.
Thank you.
We distributed that earlier, so I want to use that. The bill that Representative Reedy just presented, and my bill actually started out, the original my bill started out as the same. Now, we've all been looking at the property tax, the personal property tax issue. I know Senator Eigel, he's not even paying attention, but this is a hot button for him. He's not even listening to me. Can you believe that? His number one priority, and he is not even listening to my presentation. I've got his attention. My bill actually would amortize the personal property tax depreciation over 20 years. Honestly, I think that's a little bit too far, but that was a starting point. I want to give a shout out to Representative Reedy because this was his idea to do this depreciation schedule. He's a former assessor. It was all his idea, and I think that was a great idea, a great way to do it. The other part of my bill that I want to call attention to is the portion dealing with tangible personal property. This is something totally different that we've put on this bill. This was brought to me by a constituent or former constituent. There's a House bill that is very similar to it, but I thought it was a great idea to fix it. This is dealing with, it's just clarifying that when you sell property at a tangible personal property at an auction, it's not subject to sales tax. This constituent there was some kind of an issue with Department of Revenue, and this is going to clarify that it is not taxable. To me, this would be like buying something in a garage sale. You don't pay taxes on it, much like we have a lot of public auctions in our area. We just want to make sure that public auction items are not subject to sales tax. That's what this portion does. As far as the depreciation part, I'm willing to work. I think Representative Reedy actually has some really good things in his bill as well, but mine's kind of a starting point. But I did want to really key in on that sales tax issue that actually came from a former constituent of mine. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the bill sponsors? Senator Eigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, this is kind of in your lane. First of all, I want to echo what Senator Crawford said in that I don't normally change my mind very often, but I want to congratulate you because when I spoke to you, you actually, your idea about the depreciation schedule was such a good one that I actually tried to incorporate that into an earlier Senate bill that this committee had heard. I guess my question for you is the latest fiscal note and forgive me if I hope I have the right one, because fiscal notes, there's a million of them. I want to say, is it still the one that it says the general revenue impact is unknown less than 300,000 and unknown for local government? Is that the fiscal note you have for your current version of the House bill?
Yes, the general revenue part of it has to do with the blind pension fund,
right?
Because that is the state levy, and that is on all taxes. And reduction, I think it's showing that it could be as with a projection that this could lower values of motor vehicles 10.3%. Reduction of like 638,000 for blind pension fund.
So also on this 0.03p fiscal note, it shows the local government being impacted by an unknown amount. And when I saw that, it's it's interesting to see that it was unknown, because I have a bill that was perfected, I think you're probably aware, on the Senate floor. And there were only 3 differences between your bill and what's before us in this committee now. One, I had a depreciation schedule of 10 years instead of 15. So I know that there probably would be some sort of, moderate to medium impact from that. We had a exemption in there for farm equipment, which was worth about $10.2 million of local revenue. And then we did a one-time assessment cut of a rate from 33.3, where we're at now for vehicles, down to, I think it was 31%. That was worth about $110 million. Pretty much everything else was the same, and yet a fiscal note that came out the morning before this was supposed to go in front of the Fiscal Oversight Committee suddenly showed or claimed that my version of the bill was going to have a $500 to $600 million fiscal note. And so now I'm seeing what is a relatively similar bill from you, and the fiscal note folks are saying that the value is unknown. So I guess my first question would be, and I don't think you do, but I just want to ask this to make sure. Do you have any reason, do you know of any reason why we seem to have such wide variance in the fiscal notes?
I do not.
Okay. No. My suspicion is that I don't think the folks that are putting these fiscal notes out are getting information from certain offices, in particular budgeting and planning, which is reporting some of these odd fiscal notes, that is using accurate or verifiable information. And that unfortunately has derailed the original bill that we perfected through the Senate, because now there are members of the Fiscal Oversight Committee who perhaps they feel they don't know what to expect. They can't really move these bills forward. So I guess do you know of any other impact? What do you believe? Do you believe this is going to end up in a cut to personal property tax revenues, or do you think it's going to be about even?
In my opinion, with the 15-year depreciation schedule, I believe that there might be a cut, but not a huge cut.
Okay.
We did some.
I think that's fair.
What happened when this bill was sent back from rules back to the original committee? That's why it's committee substitute number 2. We contacted several counties and said, with different scenarios, what if we use a 12? Because the original that came out of the House was 12. Right. Then when it went back, it was extended out to 15 with a hard cut at 15, with no residual from there on. And we asked these counties to tell us how much revenue that was going to drop. And I think at 15 there's probably going to be a tax reduction, but I think we also have to keep in mind that in 21 and 22, these taxing districts, when these values went up, they took a windfall in taxes from those districts. I've had many people talk about same vehicles that they had from one year to the next and what the difference in taxes was. That's what my bill is to address. I fundamentally do not believe that if you have a vehicle, it's a year older, it's got 20 or 30,000 more miles, I don't care what the used car market says, I don't believe that person should have to pay more personal property tax on that same vehicle. And that's what my bill was to address that situation.
Do you happen to have an opinion on what you think at 15 years the cut to local areas would be, roughly?
How much percentage, or
just statewide? Are you able to calculate that at all?
we weren't really able to do that.
Okay.
But I think it's really interesting when you start doing these comparisons. If you look at these older vehicles in comparison to, I had one county give me, what is your 20 and 21 vehicles bringing in revenue? It was almost, even though there was a lot less vehicles, those vehicles are valued higher.
Right.
So it was about the same in taxes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Very good. Well, I have a, this isn't necessarily a concern on your bill because I think any effort to reduce personal property tax is a good one. I think we've got some real concerns in the fiscal note process and what's been happening to these bills as they move over to the Fiscal Oversight Committee. So I'm going to try to work to see if we can maybe alleviate some of those concerns before we have the Senate spend more time on considering this particular issue. But I certainly think that your bill is another what I would call step in the right direction. So I really appreciate you presenting this bill today, and I wish I could take you with me to every event that I go to around the state representative because you do such a great job of explaining this.
Well, you know, I served as county assessor for 27 years, and as an assessor, I was not a fundraiser for the districts. I was an advocate for my taxpayers in my district. And I just think what is fair, and this is something we need to do, and we need to get it done to protect our taxpayers. We did put in my bill on the floor a provision where a value guide could be used this year to kind of rectify some of those values so that to protect the taxpayers, because there is an effective date of January 1st of 24 on this. But I think we need to get a handle on it, at least let our people know that those vehicles are going to depreciate, not appreciate.
Very good. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for the bill sponsors? Seeing none, thank you all for your testimony. Just by a show of hands, how many do we have here to testify today? Planning on testifying. All right. First up to testify in favor of these two bills. Anyone here to testify in favor? All right. Seeing none. First up to testify in opposition. Anyone here to testify in opposition? Seeing none. Anyone here to testify for informational purposes only? Proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Wood. I'm the policy analyst and liaison for the State Tax Commission. Thank you for taking testimony on both of these together, so that way it just makes one trip up instead of two. There are several versions of the same bill popping up with different depreciation schedules and additional tax cuts, but the issue I want to address today is the details and timing. Currently, the motor vehicle values are determined in October of the year previous to the assessment. The assessment forms are sent out after January 1st of the assessment year and are due back before April 1st. As the forms come in, the assessors will enter the information to determine the values. The process is completed in the middle of June so that the clerk can work with the political subdivisions and the auditor's office to determine the appropriate levies. In Senate Bill 493, there's a delayed implementation of January 1st, 2024. That would be for the entire bill. Would not go into effect until January 1, 2024. That would mean the depreciation schedule method would begin in 2025, assuming that the money is appropriated in the next session's budget for the data and programming changes. The bill becoming active on January 1st, 2024 causes a problem as the motor vehicles are to be assessed as of January 1st, but the data that would be needed to be in the assessor's program wouldn't be available until the bid process was completed and the programming changes made for November 15th of that year. That means there would be no data to make the assessment with in 2024. In House Bill 713, an emergency clause and language was added that would allow for alternative pricing guides to be used before December of 2023. The depreciation schedule would go into effect on January 1 of 2024, but the pricing guide wouldn't be purchased until there was an appropriation by July 1 of 2024, or you could go a little earlier with a supplemental request. The guides would be delivered to the software companies in November of 2024, but the assessments for personal property that year would be completed in the previous June. That leaves a year without a method to assess the motor vehicles or farm equipment. Some versions of the bill allow for current assessments to be transferred to the depreciation schedule, but it is unclear whether the depreciation will be done by the local software with changes paid for by the state, which is what the language says in the bill, or if the STC will be responsible for the depreciation before the data is provided to the assessors. So that needs some clarity if it's possible if you do a sub on this. And the STC has not taken a position on the bills other than they agree that removing the specific vendor in statute is needed. Whatever methodology makes it through the process, it is necessary that the requirements of the bill are possible to accomplish and doesn't leave a time without instructions for the assessors and the STC to assess motor vehicles and farm equipment. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Next up to testify for informational purposes only. Proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Nancy Peddington with the Missouri Association of County Developmental Disability Services. We're the state association of the county SB40 disability boards. We appreciate the intent and understand the intent behind this legislation. We just want to ensure everybody remembers that county SB40 boards are only able to assess property tax, that we are not able to assess any other type of tax levy similar to other political subdivisions. So if there's any kind of an impact to property tax revenues, that directly affects the services that we're able to provide to people with disabilities, and the prevalence of developmental disabilities continues to rise. Autism, for example, just increased to 1 in 6 versus 1 in 7 people having that condition. So just wanted people to keep that in mind as you move forward with this bill, but of course we understand and appreciate the intent behind it.
Any questions for Senator Eigel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess my question, it must be very concerning for you to see an unknown on the fiscal note.
That is correct. We don't know the ages of the vehicles and what impact and value that will have as revenues would decrease.
So as I mentioned, I kind of detailed some of the differences between a bill that previously came to the body and this one. Do you believe that this will ultimately lead to a tax cut and a reduction in revenues for local areas?
We do. We also understand, I believe you and I had conversation during the last testimony that we had, that there may be something that needs to give somewhere for somebody, and we would consider what that might be, what impact that might have. This one, I believe, would be less significant, extremely less significant than the other version of the bill. And of course, any impact at all. I mean, for example, on average, about $1,500 in reduction in revenue for a county board is less services for one particular person.
So could you quantify what you mean by extremely less significant?
These particular pieces of legislation do not include the farm equipment, as I understand it, which is a big.
How much is that worth?
That I don't know off the top of my head. That is in the fiscal note. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. The other part is the direct cut to the property tax rates, especially with the intent to eliminate it altogether. That would make county boards non-existent if there's no property tax revenue at all.
So that wasn't in the perfected version of the last bill.
No, it was not.
The value of that one-time assessment is about $105 million, if I'm remembering correctly, to local areas.
Mm-hmm.
But you do believe that there is some sort of cut in the heart of the bill, which is just the depreciation schedule itself.
That's correct.
How much do you believe that's going to?
I don't have enough data to answer that in a quantifiable amount.
There is going to be
right. From conversations with the county boards, I believe it is. We don't have enough information to say that.
Of some cut.
I wouldn't say we're supportive of it. We're realistic that may happen, and we understand and appreciate the intent behind that these legislators have put forward.
Do you support any cut to personal property tax revenues?
I'm on record for information purposes only today. I can't say what I personally believe.
Well, I mean, on behalf of your organization, do you support any cuts to personal property tax revenues?
Generally, no.
Okay, so you've just admitted that this is a cut to personal property tax revenue, so aren't you actually...
I believe that it would. I don't have the data I don't have the data on the ages of the cars and the values.
Consistency in your testimonies, because you've admitted that it's going to cut personal property tax bills, and you don't really know how much, which would seem to imply that you should be more opposed to this if you don't actually know what the impact is, but you know it's going to be a cut, and yet you seem to be avoiding saying you're opposed to the bill. But I don't understand it. Why is that?
Well, the difference between this bill and the bill that we previously discussed, Senator, had to do more with the overall cut and the intent to eventually eliminate the personal property tax revenue for county boards.
Interestingly enough, the bill that we heard testimony on, that previous bill, actually would not have any cuts go into effect unless it was replaced by other revenue. So there wouldn't be a reduction in those budgets, but there would be a reduction under this bill. We just don't know what it is. Do you see the inconsistency I'm talking about?
I see many inconsistencies, Senator.
Oh, what other inconsistencies?
Just in general, the whole overall bill. I'm not going to debate the other bill with you. I'm here to show just information on how this bill would impact the disability services today.
It sounds like you're opposed to this bill, but you seem to have some reason why you don't want to say that.
Because I don't have enough data for that. I also, again, this is I believe, less intrusive. This goes over 20 years. It does not include as much property. The impact would not be as significant, I don't believe, as the other bill that we previously discussed.
Can you appreciate the irony of giving testimony for informational purposes only just to tell us that you don't have enough data?
I don't have the quantifiable data.
Okay. All right. We'll have to continue this again. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none. Representative, Senator, do you have any final concluding remarks? Nope. Great. That concludes the hearing on House Committee Substitute number 2 for House Bill 713 and Senate Bill 493. I now make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? I do have a second. All those... Oh, hold on one second.
I know it's over. I know it's over with.
Yep.
My concern is this: it did come out of the House without a fiscal note on the local side, and I'm kind of confused on how that happened. And I can talk to you offline. Let me talk to you offline on it, because I don't understand why there's no fiscal note. Yeah, I got it.
Any further questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We are adjourned.